My wife has an unattainable white moonlight. On our third wedding anniversary, she gave me the pregnancy test report of the child she is carrying as a gift. Faced with my questioning, my wife disdainfully replied, "Whose child it is doesn't matter. As long as he calls you dad, that's enough. Don't forget, you're just a dog working for my family." Later, she knelt in front of me, her face full of regret. "I know I was wrong. Can't we start over?" Ding. Story Shots reminds you to click the subscribe button at the bottom right corner to read the full novel. Today is the third anniversary of my marriage with Hughes Alicia. To celebrate, I ended my business trip early and postponed my business engagements. I had my assistant order flowers and a cake. Carrying the rare handbag I had reserved 2 months in advance, I rushed back to the villa. The housekeeper told me that Hughes Alicia hadn't returned yet. I wasn't surprised at all. She spends her days at the villa dedicated to parties, partying every day. I waited until midnight, until the cream melted and the cake collapsed into a mess, before Hughes Alicia finally came back. "Jeffrey, make me a bowl of hangover soup." She smelled of alcohol, walking barefoot and swaying to the dining table, staring at the melted cake and chuckling, "So ugly." Then she pulled a piece of paper from her bag and tossed it onto the table, chin held high. "A gift for you." I was a bit surprised. Even on my birthday or our anniversary, Hughes Alicia rarely took the initiative to give gifts. I reached out to unfold the paper and quickly scanned it. After I realized what it was, my heart began to race. "I'm going to be a dad." These words kept echoing in my mind. I stubbed out my cigarette, my hands trembling slightly. I read it over twice again. The joy I had longed for clouded my head. I suddenly stood up and drank all the water in my cup, taking a while to calm down. In 3 years of marriage, I had told Hughes Alicia many times that I wanted a love child, but she always made excuses, saying she was too young and needed to prepare for pregnancy. I never expected such a big surprise on our anniversary. By the time her anger from coming home late faded away, I walked over to the sofa and picked her up. "You're drinking while pregnant. You're really bold." Hughes Alicia wrapped her arms around my neck and wobbled her feet. "Carry me upstairs. I want to take a shower." I didn't stop my steps as I went upstairs, leaning in to kiss her. But Hughes Alicia tilted her head and dodged. She playfully slapped my face twice with the back of her hand, half smiling. "Stop it. I'm tired. You should sleep in the guest room tonight." This was the same expression she had when we first met, looking down on me as if she was generously bestowing a reward. Like a dog successfully catching a thrown snack, receiving a reward of satisfaction from its owner. "She's pregnant. I have to be tolerant." I frowned, suppressing my anger. As soon as she entered the bathroom, I grabbed a nightgown to head out but saw her phone light up on the bed. A new message appeared on the screen. "Brandon 76. I don't want the child to have his surname." This sentence struck me like a lightning bolt, waking me from my joyful days. That he could only be me. There was no need to think. My mind went blank, but my hand instinctively reached for the phone. I tried to convince myself that this was just a normal chat. I tried the password 4 times, and none were correct. Only one chance left. I was sweating in a panic. Finally, I entered it with a last-ditch effort. It worked, but at the same time my heart sank. 0706 is the birthday of her white moonlight, Johnson Brandon. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped. Hughes Alicia was applying body lotion. I quickly flipped through the chat history. "I have no feelings for Mr. Flores. All these years, I've never forgotten you. Darling, as long as I see you, I can't help but want to give myself to you. A child can only be the product of love. I don't even want to have a child. Baby, just hang in there. He's just a dog making money for my family. My dad said he's capable, and the money he earns is still for raising our son. Don't worry, darling. He's been looking forward to a child for a long time. He'll definitely be surprised. Don't you think it's exciting for him to raise your child?" Exciting my ass. My heart shattered into pieces with every word. All these years, I had poured my heart and soul into my wife. Since our marriage, I had tirelessly helped her family stabilize the company and quell internal strife. But this is how she speaks of me to Johnson Brandon. After all, he's just a loyal dog. He's treated me well over the years, so I'll give him a little sweetness. My dad is abroad, and the company still relies on him, so my heart and love should naturally belong to you. Seeing this, I trembled with anger, but more than sadness, I felt rage. This bitch is playing me like this. The bathroom door opened with a click, and Hugh's Alicia, drying her hair, froze when she saw me. What are you doing here? I had already reset my phone to its original state, just getting my nightgown. Hugh's Alicia nodded and sat at the vanity, running her hand over her flat stomach. She smiled, as if thinking of something happy. But when she looked up, her expression turned cold. It's not easy to get pregnant. Before the baby is born, you should stay in the guest room. This wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. So damn entitled. Even though I wanted nothing more than to slap her across the face, I forced a smile. Let me accompany you to the prenatal checkup. We can ask the doctor. I went to the study to access the villa's surveillance footage. Alicia Hughes loved throwing parties, but she prided herself on not being a promiscuous person and never stayed out all night. At first, I often checked the surveillance footage, and all I saw coming in and out of the villa were her girlfriends. After watching for a year without any unusual activity, I gradually let go of my suspicions. I went through nearly half a year's worth of surveillance footage. I also had my assistant investigate Brandon Johnson's whereabouts. The more I looked, the angrier I got. It turned out that Brandon Johnson had divorced 3 months ago and returned to the country, and the next day he contacted Alicia Hughes under the pretext of a class reunion dinner. Alicia hid him in the villa, spending her days in close quarters with him. During my business trip, they were inseparable, moving from the living room to the kitchen, from the sofa to the balcony. In the 3-story villa, the two of them indulged in their affair, completely oblivious to the surveillance cameras. Afterwards, she laughed and leaned on Brandon's shoulder, saying, "You have no idea how much I've suffered these past 5 years. I thought about you every day." Brandon was so happy he trembled, pulling a pillow over his bulging belly. "Then why do you still go back every day? Why not divorce him? Wouldn't it be better for us to be together?" Alicia leaned in. "Not yet. The company relies on him to make money. Once my dad returns from abroad, I'll divorce him right away. He can't take a single penny of my family's money." Reading this, my breathing quickened, and I slammed my palm down, knocking a decorative item off the table. This couple made me sick. Leaning against the wall with my hand on my chest, I smoked half a pack of cigarettes to calm my racing heart. Alicia said she consulted a doctor and was advised to exercise restraint in her marital life during her pregnancy. The last time was more than 2 months ago when I returned from a business trip, and I got so drunk at a social event that I lost track of myself. The next morning, Alicia scolded me, saying it wasn't a safe period. It turned out she had set the stage that early. The actual time she conceived this child was when I was clearly on a business trip abroad. I didn't sleep all night, yet Alicia looked rosy and well-rested. At the breakfast table, she asked, "My dad will be back before the due date, right?" Mr. Hughes was obsessed with business gambling, misappropriating company assets and evading taxes, and had run off abroad over 2 years ago. At that time, I didn't want her to worry, so I only told her that her father had gone abroad to expand the business. I also mentioned that Mr. Hughes often didn't come home for years when he was younger, and she believed me. Now, I didn't have the energy to care about her feelings. Probably. In fact, I had already called overseas this morning to inform them, so there was no need to waste resources looking for him anymore. I also informed my assistant that starting today, I would gradually withdraw the funds previously used to stabilize the cash flow. Seeing my cold demeanor, Alicia warned me, "You're just temporarily managing the company. Don't get any funny ideas. You'll regret it when my dad comes back." I was tired of hearing that. Alicia had no business acumen. Her biggest dream was to be a full-time housewife. She didn't realize that the Hughes family was already weak and on the verge of collapse. The current group relied on the industries I had developed over the years, and once I withdrew the funds, the Hughes family's debts would come rushing in. Alicia thought she had scared me and smiled. "I'm just joking, darling. We're family. There's no need to make it us versus them. This baby will require money everywhere. Honey, can you send me $200,000 first? I want to buy some baby supplies while shopping." Family, my foot. Seeing I didn't respond, she rarely took the initiative to lean in for a kiss. I dodged her by pretending to grab my coat. If this were before, my lovely wife coming in for a kiss would have delighted me. But now Alicia had cheated on me. She was carrying someone else's child and still wanted me to play the role of the fool. She was dirty. Too dirty. She didn't deserve to be with me anymore. But I couldn't tear the facade just yet. I needed her to initiate the divorce and walk away with nothing. I gritted my teeth to suppress my rage inside. The company is facing difficulties lately. There's no money. After a while, when she realized she couldn't get any money, she angrily pushed the plate away and stomped upstairs. The sound of her footsteps was loud and heavy. My mind drifted back to the day I first met Alicia Hughes. In college, I was assigned by the board of directors to oversee Alicia's university life because of my outstanding abilities. Alicia was a prominent figure at a university, driving luxury cars onto campus, throwing parties in her villa, and the board was always at her beck and call. Rather than being the vice president of the student council, I felt more like a dog tasked with keeping Alicia's emotions in check. Perhaps because she had been spoiled since childhood, Alicia looked down on someone like me, a bookworm from a small town. In front of her classmates, she directly called me a sycophant, making me sign for her, run errands, and even wipe the floor with her clothes. I swore I would never comply, but she had her lackeys forcibly take me back to her house. Stepping on my head, she sneered, "Jeffrey Flores, I heard you're an orphan with no power or influence. How can you compete with me? Student loans and scholarships are all just a word from me." I approached the principal but was threatened with an extension of my studies. Calling the police was useless. Since it was just a minor injury, I was advised to settle things amicably, and verbal insults couldn't be proven. Alicia Hughes had a good attitude about admitting her mistakes and was eager to reconcile, but afterward, her behavior only escalated. I hated it. Can rich kids just bully others like this? But for the sake of my scholarship and research paper, I had no choice but to endure her. Because of this, I witnessed Alicia Hughes and her shining star, Brandon Johnson, in a melodramatic love story that seemed straight out of a romantic drama. In our junior year, Brandon decided to study abroad. Without any status or claim, Alicia couldn't stop him and got completely drunk, while I ended up drinking quite a bit too. Perhaps it was the drunkenness, or maybe Alicia's strong sense of unwillingness, but she showed a different side of herself. Gentle, alluring, and unusually proactive. That night was wild. I vented my pent-up anger in another way, and it lasted until dawn. After that night, Alicia's attitude toward me changed. She no longer acted so domineering. Alicia was quite satisfied with me, and her father needed a capable successor. We seemed like an ordinary couple. One day, Alicia decided to cook for the first time, creating a romantic candlelit dinner while wearing a slightly playful outfit. It ignited a sense of excitement in me, and I thought this must be what love is all about. The next day, she took the initiative to propose marriage, and I thought she had truly fallen for me. But now, looking at the message from my assistant, I couldn't help but laugh. It turned out the reason she wanted to marry me was that Brandon had gotten married abroad that very day. Unknowingly, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. That tiny spark of hope in my heart had vanished. From that day on, I followed Alicia under the pretext of needing to care for a pregnant woman. She went shopping and I paid. She went clubbing and I stopped her. I accompanied her to every hospital checkup. At night, I insisted that to take care of her, we had to sleep together. Alicia was unwilling deep down but couldn't let me see it. Because I was around, she couldn't flirt with Brandon over the phone at night. This made Brandon furious. With phone calls coming in one after another, Alicia tried every possible excuse to cover up, her face flushed with anxiety. I found it amusing. The flustered look on those two lovers was truly laughable. In a week, she hadn't found a chance to meet Brandon privately. My company couldn't compare to the thrill of her secret rendezvous with her shining star. It didn't take long before Alicia couldn't hold back any longer. She started picking fights with me over various excuses. I was no longer as tolerant as before, nor would I let her have her way. When she got agitated, I remained cold toward her. When she claimed she wanted to run away from home, I stopped her, not giving her a chance to see Brandon. Alicia trembled with rage. "Jeffrey Flores, what the hell do you mean? This child isn't even born yet, and I have to put it first in everything. Am I even a person? If you keep treating me this way, do you believe I can get rid of this child at any moment, using someone else's illegitimate child to threaten me? Ha! If it were before, I might have been fooled by her acting skills." I replied impatiently, "If you want to get rid of it, do it right away." She didn't expect that I would be so unmoved, and she really considered getting rid of the child. Alicia's expression turned grotesque. Her eyes reddened as she shouted and even tried to scratch me. Startled, the 4 housekeepers rushed over to stop her. Alicia screamed while punching and kicking at the housekeepers. "Jeffrey Flores, you beast, you're just our family's dog. Don't you remember what you were like in college? You're not even worthy of licking my boots. Don't stop me. You're all just working for me." I spoke coldly. "Help her upstairs to rest. It's better not to go out while she's pregnant." The housekeepers nodded in agreement, and the 4 of them worked together to pull Alicia upstairs. That day, I found the cleaning lady for the suburban villa. When the housekeeper saw me, she immediately admitted her mistakes, saying Alicia had threatened her with dismissal to keep it a secret. But she knew very well who was paying her salary. I didn't make things hard for her. I just asked her to say more sweet words about our married life in front of Brandon. I wanted to emphasize the sweet life Alicia and I had shared over the past 3 years, as well as the Hughes family's wealth. The housekeeper quickly understood and went back to mock Brandon coldly. I wanted to plant the seeds of desire in Brandon's heart, making him unwilling to be the soft-hearted man hidden away in the suburbs by a woman. The next day, Alicia pretended to have a stomach ache early in the morning. At the hospital, during the wait for her checkup, I went to the restroom and returned to see Alicia gazing longingly at the corner of the corridor. Brandon's figure flashed by there. I feigned ignorance and asked, "What are you looking at?" Alicia snapped her gaze back to me, giving me a cold look. "Nothing. I want to go home." Her mood changed so quickly. It was a pity she didn't learn Sichuan opera. I pretended to care, saying, "Weren't you feeling sick? It's better to see a doctor." Having just met Brandon and eased her longing, she was now thinking about how to go to the suburban villa openly, so she naturally didn't want to deal with me. She waved her hand dismissively, frowning like a spoiled child. "I'm not in pain anymore, honey. I want to go home. The smell in this hospital is too awful. It's not good for the baby." She used to act cute like this with me often, and every time, I was melted by the contrast from her college days, wanting to spoil her to the heavens. Now that I think about the fact that she was pretending for Johnson Brandon, I can't help but want to slap her twice. Playing along, who doesn't do that? I smiled, pretending to be intimate as I ran my fingers through her hair, then picked her up and cradled her in my arms. "Listening to you, let's go home." Like a scene from a drama, the people waiting around us gasped in surprise. In the past, Hugh's Alicia often made me carry her like this. But now, the situation is different, and with her lover watching, she frowned. "What are you doing? Put me down." I ignored her, suppressing my disgust as I planted a kiss on her forehead. Hugh's Alicia froze, her face turning slightly red. Anyone watching would think we were a loving couple, especially Johnson Brandon, who was hiding in the corner. He stood there with clenched fists, his eyes red, staring at us intently. Once we got into the elevator, I set Hugh's Alicia down. "There's work at the company, you can drive back yourself." Hearing this, her face lit up. You go ahead. Don't worry about me. Hughes Alicia was hoping I would stay busy, giving her a chance to meet with Johnson Brandon. I just hope she doesn't waste the opportunity one gave her. The entire afternoon, Hughes Alicia didn't go home. She was with Johnson Brandon at a villa in the suburbs. I drove over, pushing the speed limit. When I arrived, they were strolling in the yard. Hughes Alicia was caressing her belly, smiling charmingly as she spoke, while Johnson Brandon had his arm around her waist. From behind, they looked like a loving couple. 5 hours ago, Hughes Alicia had been picking a fight with me, and now she was sweet with her lover. The more I watched, the more nauseating it became. I pulled off my tie and wrapped it around my hand, then kicked Johnson Brandon from behind. He was caught off guard and kicked far away. What the hell? Who are you? Before he could react, I pounced on him like a lion protecting its territory. I didn't give him a chance to speak, throwing 3 punches right to his face. All the pent-up anger from these days was finally released. Take that for messing with me. 1 punch, 2 punches, 3 punches. First, he tried to fight back, cursing at me. After 3 punches, he could only cover his face with his hands, whimpering, "Brother, don't hit me, I was wrong." Hughes Alicia was stunned. She had never seen me this furious. It wasn't until I stood up and walked aside that she reacted, rushing over to help Johnson Brandon. "Florist Jeffrey, are you crazy? Why are you hitting someone?" "Am I crazy? If I didn't hit him, that would be crazy." I suppressed my anger. "That scoundrel just tried to touch you. He's after my wife. It's justified to beat him." After saying that, I pretended to rush at him again, scaring him into hiding behind Hughes Alicia. He looked so pathetic it almost made me laugh. 7 years had passed, and I had only seen him in the surveillance footage, where he looked like he had gained weight. Now, taking a glance, Johnson Brandon had a swollen face, with a few pimples on his forehead and cheeks, completely unrecognizable from the handsome guy he once was. Hughes Alicia must be blind to find him appealing. "What are you talking about? He's Johnson Brandon. We haven't seen each other in a long time, just catching up." Hughes Alicia's eyes darted, one hand on her belly. "Don't do anything reckless. If you hurt our child, I won't forgive you." "Catching up? They've taken it to the bed." "Ha, this we. I really can't tell if she means me or Johnson Brandon." Johnson Brandon, who was hiding behind her, let out a sigh of relief, raising his head with a look full of provocation and mockery. It was as if he was laughing at how they were toying with me. Damn, no one can tolerate this. I pretended not to recognize him, striding over. "Johnson Brandon has been abroad for a long time. He's a fraud. Honey, stay away from him. If he dares to take advantage of you, I'll kill him." Today, I was all about being protective of my wife. She was so angry she was panting, but couldn't blame me. Johnson Brandon, who was originally turned to the side, saw I was coming for him and tried to run, but I grabbed him by the collar. I struck him hard in the stomach with my elbow. I had played basketball with Johnson Brandon back in college. He was only 3 inches shorter than me, so we were evenly matched. But after years abroad with high sugar and hormones, and indulging in forbidden substances, he had become weak and out of shape. With 2 elbows, he collapsed like a lump of meat on the ground, crying out, "Alicia, Alicia, save me, babe, stop him." Hughes Alicia panicked, rushing in to block me. I pretended to be out of control and slapped her twice. Once my anger was released, I finally stopped. Hughes Alicia was stunned, tears streaming down her face, pointing at me, trembling. I acted as if I had just noticed it was her and quickly apologized profusely. I had put nearly all my strength into those slaps. Felt good. Hughes Alicia's face quickly swelled up. "Florist Jeffrey, how dare you hit me? I'm going to call the police." I pretended to be troubled. "I really didn't mean to, but if you're going to call the police, let them check the surveillance footage. There's a stranger coming and going in our house. We might lose valuable items." Hearing surveillance, Hughes Alicia remembered what she and Johnson Brandon had done, her face turning pale. "Forget it. There's no valuable items anyway. I added fuel to the fire. We must call the police. If I hit you, I have to take responsibility. I'm ready to file a report. Don't call the police. Don't call the police. Johnson Brandon hurriedly held back his pain and persuaded. He's just a scoundrel. I'm not going to stoop to his level. He was afraid that Hughes Alicia would find out about his messy business abroad, so he naturally didn't dare to call the police. I continued to play the role of a sycophant, comforting Hughes Alicia, while cursing Johnson Brandon for being ugly, definitely not the campus heartthrob he once was. In my words, I occasionally hinted that the company was busy, with several projects at critical stages, and I mistakenly accused her out of anxiety. However, Hughes Alicia grew angrier the more she listened. Get lost? I don't want to see you. She glared at me, but her hand was holding on to Johnson Brandon, as if they were the real couple. Johnson Brandon breathed a sigh of relief, but his eyes were filled with unwillingness and greed. I issued my final ultimatum. Hughes Alicia, either come home or get a divorce. You choose. As expected, Hughes Alicia didn't come home with me. She only showed up the next noon, followed by a man. Lawyer Dunn was dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase. At Hughes Alicia's signal, he took out 2 documents and placed them in front of me. Hughes Alicia said, "Let's get a divorce." Her tone was cold, and her eyes held a hint of mockery as she looked at me. It was as if I were just an ant that she could crush at any moment, a look that overlapped with 7 years ago. It was disgusting. I knew that Johnson Brandon was itching to reach into the Hughes family's business. And under his sweet words, Hughes Alicia had also compromised. So now all that was left was to add the final spark. I feigned shock and asked, "Wife, why? Haven't we always been so loving? You want to divorce me for that scammer?" Hughes Alicia thought I loved her so much that I couldn't bear to get a divorce, greatly satisfying her inner desire to be fought over by many. She quickly signed her name and pushed the divorce agreement in front of me. Loving? Marrying you back then was just because I couldn't accept Johnson Brandon marrying someone else. Now that he is divorcing for me and returning to the country, I naturally want to marry my true love. During these years of marriage, you've also enjoyed the life of the wealthy. This villa is yours, as a reward for working for my family these years. I gritted my teeth and pretended not to believe it. You're still pregnant. Stop messing around. We finally have a child. What nonsense are you talking about? She laughed as if she had heard a funny joke. Ha! That's not your child. I felt a sharp pain and questioned, whose child is it? At this point, Hughes Alicia felt there was no need to hide anything. While she enjoyed being with me, what she couldn't have always seemed the best. She had a youthful filter for Johnson Brandon, a heartache from these past years, and there was no hesitation. She was indifferent. I originally thought whose child it is doesn't matter. As long as he calls you dad, that's fine. You don't want to adopt, and I don't want to have your child. But now, the child's father wants to raise him himself, so there's no need for you. Hughes Alicia placed her hand on her belly, her expression happy. But I felt a surge of anger boiling in my head, my chest heaving violently, and every breath felt like fire. Even though I was psychologically prepared, hearing her say it out loud made my efforts over the years seem foolish. Slap! I swung my arm with all my might and gave her a hard slap. She was knocked onto the sofa, her face filled with disbelief. I rubbed my eyes hard, making them red. Just as Hughes Alicia was about to throw a fit, she saw my red eyes and immediately wilted. I said hoarsely, "I don't have a habit of picking up trash. Divorce is fine, but besides this villa, I want the ones in Southgate, North and Fuyuan all to myself, plus I want 20% of the company shares and $50 million in cash. I've been managing the company all along. You cheated during our marriage, so if you don't agree, go ahead and sue." Hughes Alicia panicked. "You wish? A dog like you dares to negotiate with me?" She didn't know how much the company was really worth, but she had promised Johnson Brandon last night that she wouldn't give me a penny, let alone shares. I shouted, "Then we won't divorce." Hughes Alicia was so angry she couldn't speak for a long time. She stormed upstairs to call Johnson Brandon and came down after a while. She threw the notarized document in front of me, smugly saying, "Before we got married, we did a property notarization. My family's company has nothing to do with you." Although Hugh's father had pushed for Hugh's Alicia to marry me, he initially wanted me to adopt into the family. With no parents and no background, I was the easiest to control. I refused, and Hugh's father used many means to force me, leading to a stalemate for a while. Hugh's Alicia had no business acumen. After much thought, he finally chose to have the company and assets notarized before marriage, agreeing to our marriage. It turned out all these years, they still regarded me as the one who would adopt into the family. The villa and the one in Southgate are mine, the rest is yours. As for money, Hugh's Alicia hesitated for a moment. 3 million. The villa in Southgate was the one she mixed with Johnson Brandon. I found it dirty and never intended to keep it. Besides, even if I gave it to her, they wouldn't be able to stay for long. Are you dead set on a divorce? I wore a bitter expression. Even if I made such high demands, I can't keep you. Forget it, I'm not heartless like you. I don't want the company, but I at least want 5 million in cash. Hugh's Alicia didn't expect it to be so easy. She was overjoyed. 5 million it is. Lawyer done. Write it into the agreement. If it weren't for the Civil Affairs Bureau being closed today, she would have rushed to get the paperwork done immediately. As we were leaving, Lawyer Dunn caught my eye while Hugh's Alicia wasn't paying attention. I nodded slightly. On the day we went to get the divorce certificate, Johnson Brandon also showed up. He carefully supported the visibly pregnant Alicia Hughes, pride written all over his face. Seeing us come out, he quickly ran over and wrapped his arm around Alicia. "Ex-husband, you really got a good deal with that large sum of money. When it came to dividing assets, I demanded that 5 million must be transferred to me first. In reality, fearing a break in the company's financial chain, then if they took over the company afterward, it would only lead to bankruptcy and auction. There was no money to pay that 5 million. Brandon Johnson was too eager to enter the company, taking over assets worth over 100 million. Encouraging Alicia, the two of them scrounged together and borrowed a lot online. They managed to transfer the money to me in just 2 days. After the 3 villas were transferred, we finally went to handle the paperwork. Seeing that I wasn't speaking, Brandon thought I was in a bad mood and grinned. "Alicia and I planned to get our marriage certificate today. We didn't bring any wedding candies, but we'll treat you to drinks at the wedding after the baby is born, ex-husband." I held the divorce certificate and ignored him. This was the most relaxed I had felt since discovering Alicia's infidelity. "Then I wish you both to share the hardships together." 2 days later, at the board meeting, Alicia requested that I come to hand over the management rights. Brandon was worried about any changes, urging her to call me every half hour. In fact, even if she refused my attendance, I would still go. I wanted to witness the downfall of the Hughes family with my own eyes. When I walked in, the shareholders all stood to acknowledge me. "Mr. Flores." Alicia laughed. "What, Mr. Flores? This is my family's company. He's just an outsider." The shareholders exchanged glances and cautiously glanced at me. I waved my hand, signaling them not to mind. Alicia continued, "From today on, Rouet Group has no Mr. Flores, only Mr. Johnson. All subsidiaries will be managed by my new husband." As she spoke, she pulled out a document and slammed it on the table. After the shareholders reviewed it, their expressions changed slightly, and those who had seen it unconsciously looked at me. When the document was passed to me, I picked it up and saw it was a personnel appointment letter. "Mr. Brandon Johnson is appointed as our company's general manager. He may assume office any time after returning to establish the employment relationship." The signature was from Alicia's father, stamped with the corporate seal. The date was 3 years prior, the day before Alicia and I got married. It turned out he had paved the way for Alicia long before the marriage. No matter how many years passed, Alicia could always kick me out like this. Indeed, he had only seen me as a dog fighting for the Hughes family. Brandon stood up hypocritically. "Jeffrey, I'm sorry. I'm also acting on Alicia's behalf. You've done well for the company. Once I take over, it will only get better. I shot him a glance. Yes, it was I who had led the company out of crisis multiple times. Now, however, the fruits were being picked by someone else. Alicia gently touched her belly and said, "Darling, you don't have to apologize to him. The company has always been my family's. I believe that once you take over, it will provide better material conditions for me and our baby." Brandon smiled in response. "Silly, I'm not concerned about your family background. Whether rich or poor, I'll share joy and hardship with you." I waved my hand. "Let's get to the point." Each department reported on project situations and financial statements. Alicia was scrolling on her phone, uninterested in these numbers and unable to understand them. She rarely came to the company, and I took all the documents home. She was only responsible for signing and taking the money. What surprised me was Brandon. He claimed to have a degree in business management from a prestigious school but showed no concern over the obviously deficit reports. During the meeting, he suddenly smiled inappropriately, as if thinking of something else. It seemed he was just a pretty face, making me feel more at ease. This big lump, I hope he grows to like it in the future. Finally, when it was time to hand over the management rights, Alicia coldly laughed. "My dad thought you were smart enough to watch out for you. A high achiever is just a fool. Do you know why I made you sign a prenuptial property agreement? Regardless of how long we're married, the assets will be separate. My family's company will never have anything to do with you. That $5 million was truly a bargain for you." Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. I was truly grateful for the prenuptial property agreement. In the next half-month, I was busy with business trips. I focused on developing my own career. The funds that had been used to stabilize the Hughes family were all withdrawn, and I built my own company with my team. The Hughes family's company projects faced a lack of financial allocation, leading to internal collapse and bankruptcy. When Brandon took office, he didn't receive the warm welcome from shareholders he had imagined. Instead, he was met with closed doors. I don't know who leaked the current situation of the Hughes family. Contractors who couldn't receive their payments sent several groups of people to the company, and some even came to me. When I returned home from my business trip, Alicia was squatting at the door. I had changed the door and locks, so she couldn't get in and had to guard outside every day. When she saw me, she rushed over, angrily scolding, "You little man, no wonder you agreed to the divorce so readily." I glanced at her and opened the door. "What do you want? Where's my dad? My card has been frozen. What's going on with the company? Why did the shareholders say there's no money? Are you embezzling my family's money?" Recently, people have been coming to me for debts, each one in the millions. "What's going on?" I replied casually, "You should ask the shareholders, not me." Just as she was about to explode, her gaze fell inside the house. After our divorce, I had thrown out all the soft furnishings originally bought by Alicia and replaced them with my preferred style. She surveyed the unfamiliar living room, dashed upstairs with a thud, and then, still unwilling to give up, went to the third floor with her belly sticking out. After a round, she coldly sneered at me. "I really underestimated you. Transferring assets, a dog will indeed bite." In just a few days, the furniture at home has been completely replaced. It seems there's a woman outside already, right? Aren't you just dying to divorce me, Jeffrey Flores? You really have no shame. What a classic case of the villain crying out first. I was so angry I almost laughed. "Get lost. Don't force me to slap you." Alicia Hughes widened her eyes. "I see you've forgotten how you begged and pleaded in college. How dare you talk to me like this? I'll have my dad cut off your future." I couldn't be bothered to argue with her and directly called security. Alicia screamed in anger. Before security arrived, she received a call from Brandon Johnson. The debt collectors had come knocking. She hurriedly left in a fluster. The next day, I received a call from the police. Alicia had reported me for embezzling and misappropriating company assets, even hiring a lawyer and auditor, eager to investigate the annual report. The police contacted me to cooperate with an investigation along with the other 8 shareholders. After half a month of hassle, the financial statements were all compliant and legal, with no issues in the transactions. All the shareholders agreed. The company's bankruptcy was a normal loss affected by the larger economic environment. Without any evidence, the police refused to file a case. Alicia couldn't believe it, throwing a fit at the police station. "You're all in cahoots. You must have taken Jeffrey Flores' money to protect him. You bunch of insects. I'm going to file a complaint." Insulting public officials. If it weren't for her being pregnant, she would have been detained on the spot. In the end, 2 female officers half pushed, half supported Alicia out the door. The imagined billions in assets were gone, and instead, she had to bear the company's outstanding project debts. Her expression crumbled, her voice trembling with agitation. How could this happen? When Jeffrey managed it, we were making profits. Why is it suddenly going bankrupt? There must be a problem. There must be a problem. Seeing her like this, the few shareholders who had been chatting with me quickly found excuses to leave. "Mr. Flores, we'll be going now. Don't forget about us for the Nanhai project." The dazed Alicia snapped back to reality, gritting her teeth and shouting, "It must be that you knew about the divorce and secretly transferred the assets." Close but not entirely right. I nodded to the officer at the door who was looking this way, smiling as I whispered, "Miss Hughes, don't slander good people. I've always worked diligently to help your family's business. Didn't the other shareholders just say that inside?" "Dad." Alicia found her lifeline. "When my dad comes back, he won't let you off." I smiled and said, "Miss Hughes, have you forgotten? Your dad fled abroad for tax evasion and is on the blacklist. Just now the police thanked you for providing clues. I'm sure in the near future, your dad will be able to move from abroad to prison, living a life without upheaval while learning a trade. He'll definitely thank you for being his daughter." Alicia's face grew paler. After several rapid breaths, she fainted directly. Her skirt gradually turned red with blood. Brandon, standing not far away, saw this scene and actually walked away without looking back. My heart tightened, and I unconsciously shouted, "Officer, don't let her die. Your good days are just beginning." The next time I saw Alicia was 6 months later. I had been flying around for business both domestically and internationally, and hadn't been home for a long time. That day, the property management of the community contacted me, saying a woman was lingering at my door. Alicia was unrecognizable from the last time I saw her. She was bone-thin. Even a loose t-shirt couldn't hide her gaunt figure, and her face was swollen from being beaten. Although I hadn't actively paid attention, former shareholders would still share bits of news with me. That day at the police station, Alicia lost the child she was carrying. Brandon was indulging abroad, often consuming illegal substances, which led to developmental issues with the fetus. Alicia underwent a D&C and could no longer have children, heartbroken. As a result, when she was discharged, the company had already gone bankrupt and liquidated, and the villa she lived in with Brandon was also foreclosed. The two had no choice but to move into a cramped rental unit, lacking money and work, often arguing over basic necessities. I asked, "Is there something?" Alicia gazed in the direction the car had disappeared, murmuring, "The beauty who just drove you here, what's your relationship with her? The reason you changed doors and renovated was for her, right?" She found it hard to believe that I would have such a beautiful woman by my side, so different from her current self. The woman was a partner from a listed metallurgical and mining company, as well as a collaborator in my company's new ventures. But none of this concerned Alicia. I repeated, "Is there something?" Alicia had completely lost her previous arrogance. She twisted her clothing nervously. "Jeffrey? No, Mr. Flores? Do you have news about my dad?" I shook my head. "Before we got married, your dad signed the appointment letter for Brandon. Until he left, he was teaching you how to deal with me. Now you come to ask me." Alicia Hughes trembled as she answered, "My dad has always admired your abilities and valued you, but I chose Brandon Johnson. He installed listening devices in my office and study, forced gray projects onto me, and pushed me out to take the fall when audits went wrong. All because he values me? That's... Alicia swallowed hard and fell silent. This excuse might fool college students. Less than 6 months into our marriage, I accidentally overheard Mr. Hughes discussing his plans in the study with Alicia. He taught her how to kick me out of the company at the right time and set me up in advance. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but chuckle. Your dad really understands human nature, but he underestimated me. Alicia's face grew increasingly pale, and she suddenly looked up at me. So it was you who set my dad up? I smiled and said, You can't say that. Your dad is just obsessed with gambling. Mr. Hughes is stubborn and profit-driven. No matter how well I perform, Alicia still can't let go of her first love, and Mr. Hughes would never speak up for me. From that moment on, I started pretending to work for the company while secretly partnering with friends to start a new company. With a friend as the legal representative, we took on projects from the Hughes family, gradually expanding my network. Under my management, the company began pouring funds into the new venture, but it yielded no returns. Whenever Mr. Hughes sensed something was off, I would guide him to attend business meetings. Before long, Mr. Hughes became engrossed in business gambling, and after 2 rounds, he lost all his assets to me, who was hidden behind the scenes. Later, he even resorted to tax evasion, mortgaging production line equipment, and racking up debts before fleeing abroad. Alicia isn't foolish. After running around for half a year, she has figured it out. Her face turned ashen as she crouched on the ground. No wonder I had no way to seek help. Those shareholders are all in cahoots with you. What I did couldn't be hidden from the other shareholders. Business people prioritize profit. To achieve great things, one must learn to let go of the small for the big. Having cooperated for years, they knew well the selfishness and incompetence of the Hughes father and daughter. Coupled with the profits I offered, they were more than willing to cooperate. Jeffrey Flores. She stood up and walked in front of me, tucking her messy hair behind her ear. If I get a divorce, do we have a chance to start over? She still thinks her charm is significant, mistakenly believing I love her deeply. I scoffed. You think too highly of yourself. I'm just getting my revenge. Just then, Brandon Johnson charged out of nowhere and slapped her to the ground. You filthy bitch. Are you trying to put a green hat on me, you cheap whore? Don't you love me? Why are you always lurking by his door? I'll kill you. Alicia got back up and reached out to grab Brandon's face, angrily shouting, You lied to me. You messed around abroad, causing me to lose our child. If it weren't for you, I could still be living the life of a rich person. It's all your fault. I'm going to fight you. I took 2 steps back, enjoying the scene. Brandon was really going all out against Alicia, showing no signs of the affection they once shared. He kept swinging his fists, landing blow after blow on Alicia's face. Before long, Alicia started to falter. She broke free from Brandon's grip and fell to her knees, crawling slowly toward me. Clutching my clothes, she pleaded, Jeffrey, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please save me. Let's start over. I promise I'll make it up to you. I coldly laughed. Sure, as long as you drink my footbath water, I'll let you go. Upon hearing this, Alicia's face, which still had some color, turned as white as a sheet, and she collapsed to the ground. Her face felt hot, as if she had been slapped by me, her expression twisting in pain, her body trembling involuntarily. The last glimmer of hope in her heart shattered, because Alicia remembered that this was what I had said during college when she bullied me. The Hughes family went bankrupt, and the entire industry was reshuffled. I handed over the company that swallowed the Hughes family's assets to a friend for management. The annual dividends were enough for an ordinary person to live comfortably for a lifetime. And Mr. Hughes had long since died abroad due to showing off his wealth and couldn't return. I poured all my energy into a new field I was very interested in. 2 more years passed. I grew closer to the heiress of a mining company, and one evening, I drove to pick her up for dinner. On the way, I unexpectedly saw Alicia standing on the street corner beneath the hotel. She was dressed in a cheap, vulgar long-sleeved dress, heavily made up, scanning the guests entering and exiting the hotel. Seeing the Maybach parked by the roadside flashing its hazard lights, several streetwalkers rushed over. Alicia pushed past the others and ran over, respectfully tapping on the window twice. I rolled down the car window, and the summer heat mixed with the unpleasant smell of her cheap perfume rushed into my nostrils. It was pungent and unbearable. Alicia softly asked, "Boss, do you need some service?" I didn't turn on the interior light, so she didn't see it was me standing outside the passenger window. I asked, "Where's Brandon? Did he send you out to do this?" After recognizing me, Alicia Hughes stood frozen in place. She stared blankly, her mouth agape, and soon tears rolled down her reddened eyes. Afraid of smudging her makeup, she hurriedly reached up to wipe them away. As her sleeve slipped down, revealing the ulcerated red spots on her arms, she quickly adjusted her cuff. Forcing out a faint smile, she said, "He's at home." 2 years ago, Brandon Johnson had pulled her back when she came to find me and gave her a beating. With no hope of reconciling with me, she couldn't manage to live on her own either. Brandon wanted to divorce her, but Alicia refused to agree no matter how much he hit her. As she needed money to survive, Brandon gradually stopped hitting her. Once her injuries healed, he pressured her to go out and work, while he frequently brought other women home, flaunting them in front of Alicia. Alicia was too scared of him to speak up. All she could do was wash clothes, cook, clean, and earn money to support him and his lovers. Thinking of this, tears streamed down her face again. "I need to earn money for him." I nodded. "Oh, this job suits you perfectly." Alicia's hand gripping the car window trembled slightly. I turned sideways and took out all the cash from my wallet, at least $10,000. Then I slapped the money onto Alicia's face. "Is this enough to buy your worthless self-respect?" Her actions, expressions, and words were exactly the same as what Alicia had done to me back in college. She trembled and took 2 steps back, the cash scattering on the ground. I let out a light sigh. I closed the window, started the vehicle, and left Alicia far behind. As the years went by, this moment finally completed the cycle.